Okay, good evening. Can you hear me? Yep. Um, I've taken the rather draconian step of probably muting all of you just now, but giving you permission to unmute. I have no problem at all if you want to interrupt the flow and ask questions. Um, I guess my preference would be that the questions would be on what we're speaking about now, because later on there will be there's the opportunity to ask if you've got a question in your mind just now, and unless it's directly relevant to what we're covering at the time, I'm going to speak for maybe 20-25 minutes or so, then there's question time. Unless it's directly relevant, it's probably more helpful to keep that question until the end. So we'll take it from there. Let's begin with a short reflection. By the way, my name is Ian McEwen. I am the Presbytery Property Convener. I'm a minister in Baljaffrey in Bearsden. And although I've never ever said I've regretted this in my life before, but maybe right now as the Presbytery Property Convener, I used to be a civil engineer, which is probably how I've ended up with this role. Let's begin with a short reflection. I took up I took up a fairly vague New Year resolution this year that I would spend the year listening to the Psalms and getting to know them better. My route into this has been via a singer that I really like called Ian White. And he does versions of many of the Psalms, and some of them, at least to my limited musical ear, are outstandingly good. What listening to them seems to do is cement the words into my mind because they're associated with a tune that I like. This morning I listened to Psalm 124. Right now you should be thankful that I'm only planning to read it rather than sing it for you. Here we go. Psalm 124. If God hadn't been for us, all together now, Israel sing out. If God hadn't been for us when everyone went against us, we would have been swallowed alive by their violent anger, swept away by the flood of rage, drowned in the torrent. We would have lost our lives in the wild raging water. Oh, blessed be God. He didn't go off and leave us. He didn't abandon us defenceless, helpless as a rabbit in a pack of snarling dogs. We've flown free from their fangs, free of their traps, free as a bird. Their grip is broken. We're free as a bird in flight. God's strong name is our help, the same God who made heaven and earth. The psalm tells a story of deep trust built on a people's experience of God, drawing on the memories of these people of how God had delivered them from various crisis moments in their past. Maybe it's a word for today. They knew God, and they knew that God is a God who rescues. The Church of Scotland is presently under huge pressure, and the current demands on you and congregations are also huge. It's really easy in these moments in life to give in to despondency, and the last 2 years for just about all of us have been a pretty rough ride. This Psalm 124, and feel free if you're even mildly inspired by it to read it later and ponder it. This Psalm of trusting in the salvation of God offers us a positive alternative to despondency and a counsel of despair. Let's do everything that we possibly can to choose life over death. Let's pray. Lord, as we reflect on a national church, on our own congregations, we might feel a sense of pressure like never before. And so we call on you as the God of mercy to rescue us and build something new within us. We ask for grace and peace and wisdom to journey through the painful times that lie ahead. Help us to trust that you will do a new thing and that we will again sing a new song on the other side of this. We pray for the churches, the congregations, the people in this presbytery, and also right across Scotland, and ask your blessing upon us and them. Help us this evening that we might speak with grace, truth, respect, love and wisdom. We pray this In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you for joining this Zoom meeting this evening. I know that there are many demands on our time, so thank you for taking some of your own time to be here. I have said this meeting will be 1 hour long, so we will finish at 8:30 as promised. The intention of the evening is to offer you a verbal explanation of what we're calling the building audit process. And especially important in that is the chance for you to ask questions and make comment. I sent what was a fairly long letter about this thing called AMBA. AMBA stands for Asset Management Building Audits. And what I hope in that letter was that I actually offered a very complete account of the auditing process. It was a long letter. Just from that letter, using the links provided in it. A link is just one of these little blue highlighted things. You see it underlined in the letter. And actually what is going on in that 5-page letter, which is already awfully long. Now, if you're in a congregation and it's too much detail, those 5 pages are enough. You don't need to do any more. But if you're the sort of person who likes to have access to all the information and dig a little bit deeper, you will find more information in that letter by clicking on these little blue lines than you could possibly want or imagine. In other words, there is nothing being held back. It is all available via that letter. The idea of transparency and honesty in this, because this is a sensitive thing that we're doing, is really, really important. And I hope, as well as that letter, that this evening will contribute to a sense of transparency. The reason for calling this meeting ahead of the presbytery is that AMBA is going to be mentioned at the presbytery, but the honest answer is there is no time to give within a presbytery meeting to actually pay attention to something like a new thing like this, to give it the attention it deserves. So that's why we've brought this, we've called this additional meeting ahead of the presbytery. Beyond transparency, I place huge importance on the legitimacy or the fairness of this exercise. I think there is a paradox at work. I hope you will also recognise this along with me in the way that we view our church buildings. On the one hand, I think we all know that the National Church has too many buildings that it can no longer manage or sustain, and that we urgently need to downsize. That's one part of this paradox. On the other hand, when it comes to any local discussion of our own building, which of course we love and cherish and is important to us, at the local level, every building is deemed essential. This paradox may be inevitable. I completely understand it. I suffer from it, or it lives within me as well. The bottom line is that the church, that something has to give, and we have to resolve this dilemma or this paradox. And the bottom line, and there's no point in flanneling this or avoiding it, is that these building audits in due course will be used to inform decisions about which buildings are kept and which are released by the Church of Scotland. We may as well just name it and say it. And we all know that this is incredibly tough ground to cover. Frankly, I take absolutely no pleasure in this at all. But it feels to me like a really necessary journey. And for better or for worse, it seems to have fallen on us, whether we like it or not, to travel this hard road. If I can manage it, here on the screen will be a list of headings in a moment. Let me see. These headings under building assessment, they appeared in the AMBA letter that was sent out. That was sent out to presbyters and also to session clerks. Hopefully it's found its way to property conveners as well. And these are just the broad headings that AMBA is looking at in terms of the building. Is the building wind and watertight? Is it safe to use? Are the maintenance and repair costs realistic, and are they sustainable by the congregation? Is the building secure? Is it accessible? Does the building have adequate facilities? And then there's a bunch of subheadings: heating, toilet facilities, kitchen facilities, lighting, audiovisual. And does the building offer flexibility of space? There is then another element to the assessment called the location assessment. And here I think maybe the headings are less obvious what lies behind them. But in terms of the location assessment, so this is moving towards the context or the setting of the building this time. Streetscape or setting. Is it near housing? Is it not near housing? Is it near where people are? Is it not near? Facilities and amenities nearby. Viability. Can actually the congregation sustain the management of that building in 5 or 10 years' time? Adjacencies, location in the parish. Just what actually is beside that? Where is the nearest Church of Scotland to the building? Feelings of identity and belonging. Does the community associate and feel that they belong in this church? Safety, means of travel. In other words, how do we get there? Is it a gathered congregation where there's where there's huge travel distance? Geographical cluster situations. What churches around it? Partnership opportunities. Is there another church, another denomination that could partner in the building? And then one that kind of has to be there, but to be honest, is what's the development potential? And actually, quite brutally, what that's looking at is what would happen if that site were sold. This is a significant exercise, as you can see. That's okay. Now I'm going to stop screen share. There's a lot to take in there. And for some, that is enough, and it is indeed enough. I will explain why later. But for those of you who like more detail and look at those headings and go, okay, great, that's a heading, but what does it mean? There is a document, which I'm going to hold. I have it in a folder here, and you can hopefully maybe see that page. I don't know if I'm holding it up. Sorry, I'm suffering from symmetry problems here. It's called the Land and Buildings Toolkit. It's a 43-page document issued by the General Trustees of dense type, and it's a very long read, and it is available to you via one of those links in the AMBA letter. So if you really want to find out more of the detail that lies behind those headings that I've given in the letter and shown on the screen tonight, what you do is grab the AMBA letter, click on the little blue, it says Land and Buildings Kit, and it's blue highlighted with a wee underline. You click on it, wait patiently for a few seconds, and lo and behold, by the glories of the internet, if you're patient enough and your broadband is functioning, the 43-page document will appear on your screen. On pages, I think it's 7 to 11, and I find it, with a smile on my face, I find it sad that I now know these things, but on 7 to 11 of the document, you will discover the breakdown of the first categories, the building standard assessment, with a lot of bullet points about what's meant. And frankly, if you don't want to know this, you don't need to know it. And you'll also find, I think, on pages 13 to 21, all the detail about the location assessment. I stress, this is only for those who want to know. If you're happy to know that there is a document exists and you're just happy with those headings, that's great. It works just fine. The way that we have organised this within the presbytery, these building audits, is within our local mission group. And I'm going back here to the screen share. There we go. There is a statement of our local mission groups within the Presbytery of Clyde. And we've created, I suppose, if we were being formal about it, a data structure to handle this. We're going to get a huge amount of information and forms on this. And you can see the local mission groups have been called north of the river N2, N1, N2, N3, N4, and south of the river S1 through to S5. And these local mission groups function as geographical clusters of churches. The auditors who are doing these building audits consist of every member of the Presbytery Property Committee and also 8 additional auditors who have stepped up. Let me just admit this person. So 8 additional auditors who have stepped up and agreed to help with the task. The auditors are all volunteers, and this presbytery owes these folk a debt of gratitude for taking on this task. Please at all times treat your auditor with warmth and respect, even if you've not met them before. They are simply faithful folk doing exactly what you are doing in your congregations by faithfully seeking to serve the church. That's all. In all of this, the auditor is not someone, is not an enemy. They are someone, they are simply doing a job. Within a local mission group, the same 2, or sometimes for larger areas, 3 auditors will do all the audits in that single local mission group. These auditors will be in touch with each other beforehand to try and ensure a level of a consistency of approach between them. This goes back to the earlier point about doing this entire exercise as fairly as we possibly can. The next point is really important. It is the auditor in the site during the site visit who completes the form. The role of the congregational representative, the person or representatives, there can be, we've said, 1 or 2 folk who meet the auditors at the church or the hall. Their role is to provide the auditor with the information they need, and then, as it were, to step back and decide and let the auditor decide what goes in the various boxes. The reason for this is that it is the auditors who have done the training. It's the auditors who have listened to the general trustees presenting these forms, and the auditors who have a deeper understanding of what is involved. And only by letting the auditors complete the form without fear or favour, as it were, can we ensure a level of consistency of approach between different congregations. That's really, really important. In practical terms, the intention is that the audits will take place between the 9th of February and the end of March. The auditor will make an initial contact with the session clerk. The session clerk will then put the auditor in touch with the correct person to arrange the visit at a later date. That could be the fabric convener, the property convener. It could be the session clerk themselves. I guess it could be the minister. It could be 1 or 2 people. Sometimes the information might be held better between 2 people. Really, we don't want large deputations meeting the auditor. It's a simple, friendly, open process that we are going through. At times, some of the audits are going to be taking place in February and March, and we've asked auditors where they're, some of them might be on holiday, for instance, let's say in late February or whatever. We've asked them to be in touch with congregations and give an indication of when the audits will be. So you shouldn't be hanging on too long to know, but it might be, there are going to be some congregations are going to be done in the last 2 weeks of March. It's inevitable. So please just be patient with that. But you should hear from your auditor fairly, in the first half of February or so. We reckon that an audit visit to a congregation based on a single site, some congregations have separate halls elsewhere, but on a single site will take around 2 hours. So it's a half-day proposition. The auditor will have had access to the most recent quinquennial report for your congregation, but this is only for advance preparation, not to extract any data from. All the entries on the AMBA forms, asset management building audits, will be based on what the auditor sees on the day of the site visit. Over the last few months, I have gradually become more familiar with what is involved with AMBA, as have the members of the Property Committee, some of whom are on this call tonight. I think it's fair to say that the Property Committee have been impressed by what has been put together. This is a good resource. It's a fair way of doing things. I'm sure it's not perfect. Nothing ever is. AMBA is doing something that the church has not done ever before. Previously, presbyteries arranged quinquennial building surveys at 5 or 10 years intervals. I'm sure many of you serving on Kirk sessions are familiar with them. They were done by professional surveyors in the main. These surveys only took account of the fabric of the buildings. Curiously, when you come to think about it, we as a church paid no great attention as to how suitable or otherwise a building was for mission and worship. It's one of those things, as soon as you make that simple observation, you think that's quite a strange thing that we didn't really evaluate our buildings within that lens. And that's what AMBA's doing. AMBA is helping the church ask the question, is this building a well-equipped space in the right place? Well, a quinquennial inspection would not get close to telling you this, but I am hopeful that AMBA will at least make some fair attempt at doing that. I really wish that this resource had been available for 5 or 10 years ago. It seems to me that human nature, we seem wedded to always taking action when it feels like it's too late. I mean, climate change and building audits and so on, it's the same human tendency to procrastinate and delay. And without question, the church has done that in these matters. But we are where we are, and we have no choice. AMBA, the Land and Buildings Toolkit, is mandated by the General Assembly in 2021. I am really happy as I sort of just acknowledge the timing of this. On the other hand, I'm really happy to say on behalf of the Property Committee that we do think it is a good resource. It's just that the delays in getting it out have meant that what we are doing now is being done at high speed, when potentially critical and painful decisions will rest on it further down the line. I really wish it was different. That said, a resource like AMBA will change the way that we manage our buildings. It's a softer assessment than the quinquennials that we've been used to. It's emphasising what we really want, the life-giving things that we want our church buildings to be for. Mission, worship, community engagement. That has to be a good thing, that there's now a resource that shapes the way we think about buildings in that form. When something like this for your congregation is round the corner, there is a temptation to panic slightly, or maybe more than slightly. Let me offer you a degree of comfort in this. AMBA actually produces a percentage score for each building. That probably seems brutal. That probably is brutal. We're talking about a place you love and cherish, that you forgive its anomalies and its faults, because it is a special place for you, and it ends up getting reduced to a number on a page. As I said before, the good news for us all is that the AMBA score has so many different elements within it that it is not remotely sensitive to any single input. So what that means in practice is, if you're a property convener and you can't find a certificate, right? We've all been there. This is real life. The effect on your congregation is marginal and fractional of the loss of that one thing. Let me illustrate that with a thing that we might think chicken licking, the sky is falling in. But I understand from the person who developed this resource and the general trustees that the difference between a church with a very leaky roof And an exactly identical church with a perfectly sealed roof on the AMBA score is likely to be about 1%. Now, I hope that gives you a bit of comfort. With an engineering hat on, what you call that is a robust tool, one that is not overly sensitive to small individual parts of it. That actually affords a lot of comfort for us in doing it. The auditors get comfort from that. I hope you in the congregation gain comfort from that. And actually, in terms of robustness and can we trust this as a resource, someone like me with a technical background in that, we call it robust. It means you can sort of, it's not overly sensitive to tiny things in the margins. That's really, really important with a tool like that. And it means it's been well built. Again, let's turn to the theme of legitimacy or fairness. We as auditors need to ensure that the same benchmarks are used consistently across local mission groups and actually across the whole of Presbytery. For this reason, the benchmarks, if you've looked at the forms, about congregational size, about transport habits, about groups, community groups using the church, should all be pre-COVID information. I know some of you are thinking about what we call the new normal. And I know that some of you are going to have heard what I just said, pre-COVID information, and I'm underlining that. And you're going to be going, well, there's a new normal. This has been really carefully considered. And the problem if we try to use the new normal is that presently, in the immediate, I'm going to dare to hopefully say aftermath of COVID, everything is so uncertain and variable. There are still so many major changes in behaviour and habit that we need to work from a fixed point. And if we try to say it's the post-COVID world, what we'll end up recording is congregations in different stages of a rapidly moving picture. That's not how you get a fair benchmark or datum. So that's been carefully worked through with the General Trustees. In some ways it's disappointing that we say that it's the pre-COVID benchmark because we really do know a lot will change. But it seems to me the only way to get proper consistency in the comparisons that are made and some of the data, questions about congregational size, etc. I think we'll get into a right old mess if we try to do it. Because even between the beginning of February and the end of March, the situation in our congregations could change out of all recognition. There is no stability at the moment. So, the pre-COVID benchmark is with some modest regret, but I think it's inevitable, and I hope you can hear the reasoning behind it. Also, in terms of benchmarks, the auditor needs to assess what he or she sees on the day of the site visit. We are not able to adjust what is entered into the form based on an undertaking that the work is in hand and will be done later. Again, this is after careful thought and taking advice from the General Trustees. It's the only fair way to proceed. I repeat again the really important point that what goes in a single box will not have a major outcome at all, a really marginal, fractional influence on the outcome. That's a really, really important point to know. So, if you happen not to have got your PAT testing done, take it from me as the Presbytery Property Committee, that's a little rap on the knuckles, but it will not mean that there is some disaster visited on your congregation as a result of it. So please, in that sense, relax. But honestly, we need to be doing these things like PAT testing and certificates. We cannot be slack in the way that we manage our buildings. AMBA might seem like a terrible imposition just now, and maybe it is. It's what the General Assembly has required of us. I know that many of us are feeling incredibly overloaded. Looking ahead and seeking to be positive, I think this is going to help us shape the way that we manage and develop our buildings for the better. I hope in due course that AMBA will lead to an uplift in our standards so that our buildings really develop into well-equipped spaces in the right places. And at the same time, as a presbytery, we need to hold each other, because this is going to be hard. It really is. And as said, with enormous compassion and I hope care for what lies ahead, there is going to be some tough times down the road as we do this thing. Thanks for your attention. I have said more than enough. I hope this has been pitched at the right level. The floor is open if you want to ask any questions or comments. If the comment is one of great detail, please understand that I might not know the answer. I am not yet at least, which is probably a good thing, an AMBA encyclopedia. I worry, though, that the process may only take another couple of months before I actually am. I will do my very best to answer any questions and comments as they come up. Now, folk are going to need to unmute themselves, because just to keep the audio, if you want to speak, you should be able to unmute yourself. There's 3 screens here, which makes it hard if you do the hand raise thing. I'm maybe struggling slightly to see you because there's three screens of folk. So if you want to speak, please unmute yourself. You can also wave your hand, but there's a chance that I'll be on the wrong screen and not see you.
Ian, just a thought. To unmute yourself, you can hold the space bar down, and that temporarily unmutes you.
There's Paul Pettinger giving you some computer lessons. Apparently, if you hold your space bar down, that unmutes you. Thanks, Paul.
Right.
Can I ask a question? Sorry.
Yeah.
Graham Simpson from Sherwood Green Lawn, Paisley. I understand that photographs will... Hello, Malcolm, and Kilpark, and how are you? I understand photographs will be taken as part of this. Are you expecting us to provide the auditors with photographs, or will they be doing all of the...
Yeah, great question, Graham. No, the auditors will be taking the photographs. It's things like that. There's a genuine attempt here to make this evidence-based. So, for example, if there's the boxes, the categories for the roof, the idea would be that the site visits happened in daylight, and the auditor would go out with the help of the congregational representative, who would say, here's the best place to stand to get a picture of the roof. And it means if there's then a discussion about that roof later, at least we have some piece of evidence, rather than simply the opinion of the auditor. I'm not questioning that, but it means that if there's a query comes up about the roof, hopefully we've got... But these photos are from ground level. I mean, we're not going up ladders, nothing like that. So it is what it is in terms of... But hopefully the congregational representative would know the best place to get the photo, and the auditor would be requesting, just looking around, thinking about photos that they want to take. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, thank you very much. My only other comment is that when you've been very careful to talk about buildings as if they were in isolation, but of course each building equates to a congregation, and I think that is something that shouldn't remain unsaid, because the implication of less buildings is fewer congregations.
Yeah, I'm Graham. I'm not in the least bit complacent on that. I agree, and it's this is going to be a hard road. Yeah.
Can I follow that and ask Sue Thornley from Ruan Shandon Church how the congregation's wishes get taken into account?
Do you mean?
Well, not. I appreciate AMBA is a technical study.
Yeah.
But we've also all submitted our mission plans, or whatever they were called, in January, which had all our plans for the future and all sorts of things in them. How does that get taken into account? How does it all relate? It's a big picture I'm looking for.
Yes, I'll do my best. The sort of driver of this is the Presbytery Mission Plan Act from the General Assembly 2021. And they instructed us to use this land and building toolkits, i.e. AMBA, to do this. And the AMBA outcomes and the Presbytery mission planning process go hand in hand. That is, there are facilitators coming from the Central Church who will who will advise us on how this all comes together. Christine, I guess I am. The task I've been engaged in is the delivery of AMBA, a little bit less than how we use it. I think it will help. It will help make building determinations, and that's going to be a brutal road. I realise that sounds like a vague answer. I think it's because I don't fully know it myself.
Okay, but it would be nice to know how the different parts slot together.
There will be
what the overall rating is. So, you know, communities and congregations and their buildings are all rated.
Yeah. To try to give a better answer, because I realise my answer wasn't, you know, there. The kind of the comparisons of buildings through the lens of AMBA will be done within local mission groups. And there's a whole set of, so for example, the location assessment is focusing on where that building fits into its community, as it were. It's going to be a really difficult journey as to how we do this, and it will result in the closure of buildings. And as Graham said, that is incredibly difficult for congregating, beyond incredibly difficult.
Okay.
Can I follow up on that?
Yeah, go for it.
Ian Glover from Barhead, Burrock. I want to ask about the weightings. What's the difference in the weightings between the location assessment, the kind of softer, more human side of the forum, and the harder buildings side?
I think it's, yeah. I think all these factors are given. Well, okay. Here's what happens is, once the form is complete, it is then sent to the general trustees, who put it through if anyone knows anything about Excel, it's called a macro, a little computer program that processes the data and turns it into the outcome. That is. That then will be the weighting on that is, to the best of my knowledge, that is equivalent. There is not one element of the form that's given is given a dominant weighting. In other words, all these sections are roughly equivalent. I would need to give a definitive answer to that. I would actually need to speak to someone in the general trustees who wrote that resource. But all the elements contribute cumulatively to none of them are there by accident, and they all have in what I think is a similar effect on the overall impression.
That gives me some assurance, because in a previous life, going through these types of exercises, there were invariably certain elements that were given quite a heavy weighting. And if you didn't score well in that, then you didn't score well at all.
Yeah, you know, there's an interpretive element to this, which comes later, which is and those decisions rest with the Presbytery. They rest with the Presbytery beyond the Presbytery Property Committee, which is what actually do we think is important. And there's there will be there's a discussion to be had on that. But in terms of the actual outcomes, the actual scores that emerge from it, my belief is that it's kind of pretty much equal weighting. To be absolutely certain of that, I would need to speak to this guy, Robert Lee, who's with the General Trustees.
Okay, thank you.
Ian.
Yes.
Ian, James Marr, Baldernock.
Hiya.
there's something puzzling me a little bit about this. I understand that the assessments of the individual churches will be sent to Edinburgh for some form of ranking. Do I take it from your previous answer that, in fact, this ranking or a rating of the churches will be done by some form of computer program, or have I misunderstood?
I think that's, I think yes to that. It is being done by something within a piece of software called Excel that will process the form. So, for example, if there's a condition report on the roof, it will take that piece of information and work it through to calculate the kind of reporting sheet at the reporting set of scores at the end of it. So that's done by something it's actually called a macro. If we're being really strict, it's called a macro within Excel. But it's like a little computer program within an Excel spreadsheet.
Can I ask then, when these assessments or ratings are made at 121, they'll be sent back to the presbytery.
Yes.
Are these ratings binding on the presbytery when it starts to put together its plan?
I think, I'm going to voice an opinion here, merely as the property convener. As an engineer, we would always work, and this will be familiar to some of you. We used to have a phrase, it was a very important phrase actually, engineering accuracy. And engineering accuracy, the two numbers were considered to be the same when they were within around 10%. So in other words, what I'm saying with that is, if you have a building that, let's say, scores 58%, and you have a neighbouring building that scores 59%, I think it would be very strange indeed if you just said, well, AMBA said one got 59, one got 58, therefore we're going to close the 58% one. The tool is not that, it is not that precise. However, if you get a situation where you have two neighbouring buildings and one scores 65 and the other scores 40, it really would be in those circumstances, I think, AMBA really is telling you something about the facilities, the amenities of the higher scoring building and of the lower scoring building there.
I don't want to hog things, but that leads on to another point. Baldernick is a very rural parish. And I'm not certain that it's fair to compare a church in a very rural parish with a church in, say, the centre of Bearsden, Mulgai or Paisley. We're not really comparing like with like. And a computerised rating system, therefore, is almost certain to militate against the interests of the rural church. Is that a fair comment?
I don't agree with that, because the location assessment is really paying attention. It's been designed for the whole of the Church of Scotland. So, the standards of the building is a universe, but the location assessment will be discerning the context that church is operating in. So it's not some sausage machine that tries to equate apples and oranges. I mean, we could debate this, James, whatever, and come up to different opinions, but the location assessment is really looking at the context, the geographical context, and the connections of the church building. So I think it will discern a rural context.
Thank you.
Yep. James Bick, Green at St Ninians. I was going to ask a similar question, because we're in the middle of a housing scheme, and there's no churches nearby. The nearest churches are over a mile away in any direction.
Yeah.
And geographically over a hill.
Yeah.
Yeah. So at the moment, we've not actually using our buildings. We've not used our buildings since, say, March last year, 2020, because they didn't comply with the COVID assessment that was put down. Mm-hmm. You're saying we're to assess it pre-COVID, as if it's pre-COVID.
both our buildings needed a lot of work done to them. We've had already decided to abandon our church building, our sanctuary, and hopefully do work to our hall to meet the requirements going forward. But unfortunately, the heating broke down at the same time, so that's why we've not moved back in. And there's also various building works being done as well, which we had estimates for and so on. But it seems that this whole situation is just coming at the wrong time for us.
Yeah.
At the moment, we're meeting in a local community hall. We haven't been able to get our youth organisations back. In the youth church and so on, we haven't been able to bring that back because of this.
Yeah.
Can I help here, Ian?
Yeah.
Douglas Thompson here, Vice Property Convener North. I think the pre-COVID idea is for actual usage. The state of the building will be looked at as it is now.
Yes.
But as far as pre-COVID is concerned, it's for the usage, so there's a level playing field there, if that helps you.
Yeah, that's that. Douglas is correct. Very much correct in that. The pre-COVID thing is about the way the building was used, and as Douglas said, it's the actual comments on the building are being done on the day of the survey. Was it James who spoke last from Greenock?
That's right. Yeah, it was me.
I agree with what you've just said. I honestly don't know how. I mean, we will have a look at it and try to see how it can be fair. I have.
Our church buildings. Our church buildings are in the right place. They're right in the centre of the parish.
Yeah.
Across the street from the primary school, and so on.
Those last things you've said.
150 yards from the secondary school.
Yeah. Those last things you've said score well on the location assessment. You know, don't it does capture these. I'm not going to call them nuances. These important elements of a building.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Yes,
George McCarricker, Waterfront Church in Clydebank. You mentioned that when the auditor comes in, the congregational representatives would respond to him, to his queries, and take a seat back. Is it likely that at the end of his process that some dialogue will take place in relation to what he has done and found and is potentially going to be writing about before it's submitted to the presbytery or to Edinburgh?
I hope these are friendly collegiate conversations. There's not an edge to them. I mean that in any shape or form. You know, where that kicks in, if the congregational representative thinks the auditor has made a factual mistake, you know, like it's, you know, the roof is flat and the auditor has ticked pitched roof, that's absolutely up for debate. You know, it's a factual error. If there's a set of criteria, but it's where there's a set of criteria on the form, in order to have consistency, you know, in other words, what we're trying to avoid is a situation where maybe one congregation kind of had a significant input into what was entered into the form during their audit, and a neighbouring congregation had no input to that. What you then have is an unfair process. So there's an element of the conversation, the provision of facts, the you know, etc., and complete transparency about what's going into the form. But the final decision on that is the auditors, because that's how we create a fair process. That's possibly not, you know, you might have concerns about that, George, from the question, but that's what we've kind of said that the way it should go. It's not you know, it's not a democratic decision. It's the auditor who's done the training and will complete the form.
Absolutely, I don't disagree. I mean, I would expect the auditors' statements to be
Aye.
the end. All I'm saying is, do the congregation at least get some indication?
Oh yeah, sorry, I may have used step back wrongly. I didn't mean leave the room. If I didn't mean physically leave the, you know, if that's what came across, I misspoke. You know, what I mean is, it's like, you know, ultimately the auditor needs to put something in a box, and it's not, you know, it's not, I guess what I'm saying is, it's not the place of the congregation to have an argument with the auditor. Once the auditor has got all the information, it's the auditor who determines what goes in the box, because that's actually really, really important to the fairness of the process. Because the auditor then is setting that in the context of what they're doing in other churches. I hope, is that okay, George?
Yes, thanks.
Okay.
Yeah. Ian, it's Maggie MacArthur.
Yeah, hi Maggie.
It was really just following on from what George was asking. Do we actually get the information sent to us, you know, once the audit has been collated by the auditor before it goes to one-to-one? Do we get sight of it? I think maybe that's what George was asking.
I think the answer is no, Ian.
I think the answer is no. I mean, I'm trying to even think what form it's in at that point.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the honest answer is, Maggie, even the auditor, I mean, I wouldn't know how to make sense out of that. I might by the time I've done a few audits and seen how the processing goes, but I don't think it would make a lot of, I mean, what will be shared at the end of it, what the intention is to share at the end of it. I mean, I can speak to Robert Lee about this, but it won't make a lot, the raw information won't actually help very much at all.
No, I just think it might be helpful for congregations to know what boxes have been ticked and what has been said on the form.
There will be
just have a record of it.
Yeah.
We know we won't be having the rating until it comes back from one to just to have a physical record of the audit itself might be helpful for us.
I'll speak to the General Trustees and see that was not, I mean, I'm not sure we've actually asked that question, but I think Douglas chipped in and said, sorry?
Don't think that's an intention.
No, I don't think that is the intention. I will ask Robert Lee.
Sent back to get processed.
Yeah, I think in all honesty, it would not make a lot of sense. What does come back is what the data was, and then the interpretation of where that took us and the score. And there is a process there where something that is contentious can be discussed. But actually, it would boil down to, has there been a mistake made there, I think, is the question. Not just So I'll ask Maggie, but it doesn't seem, Douglas and I are thinking, having listened to this, that is the intention of the process.
It does raise the question. I mean, you've said about checking, are there fundamental mistakes made? But are you going to know there are fundamental mistakes made if you have no understanding or knowledge of what's going into the information? I think the other lady and myself are on the same track. It's to try and be able to say to the congregation, no, we've had sight of what's gone in. It was generally in line with what we have responded to him. And no, hopefully that puts the congregation at ease.
Let me see about that, George. Right, and on the basis of two things: the advice from the General Trustees who've seen this being done in other areas, and the second thing is, I'm entirely unsure how useful it would be for the congregation to see that. And I wonder if the checking process is best done after it's been processed.
I wasn't really suggesting the congregation to see it in, but the property convener, whoever's with the auditor on the day, really, as George says, to make sure there are no factual errors, and that would save difficulty further down the line when it's rated and comes back. And there is some kind of fundamental factual error.
I mean, my anticipation there was that would be that is done by good dialogue between the property convener or the session clerk or who's ever meeting the auditor and the auditor on the day. That there's a sense of consensus and contentment about what has been entered into the form.
Ian, yeah, Robert Guthrie, as someone who has had the training, as far as I'm concerned, we've been in there, we're ticking the boxes where it's A, B, C, depending on what the information is, or the toolkit.
Yes.
Then asking the question, receiving that information from whoever is the church's representative.
Yes.
We don't know what's happening in the church. We can only put on there what the session clerk or fabric convener tells us.
Yes. I mean, the
that's all
information
we can do.
Yeah.
You know, if you say that the roof is absolutely perfect, right, but there's a great big hole at the top of it, we don't know that because we're not going up to see it. All we can put in is what we're being told.
Yes.
And at the end of it, as far as I'm concerned, and if the property convener was happy with everything that's been put in there, that's all we can do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. It's just I just thought it might be helpful for the property convener to have a copy of that. That was all.
The property convener won't be able to dissect it because
I know
it all depends on what the ABS means.
I fully understand that. Yes.
Information, I think it's all there.
But it's the weighting against the ABC and all the other things.
Yeah.
Right. We don't even know that ourselves.
No.
I certainly wouldn't have been looking for anything in relation to weightings or scorings or anything like that. It's simply the factual statement on the particular questions that have been answered.
The factual answers
that was all I was looking at.
The factual answer is going to come from the fabric convener or whoever's there. We don't know.
Yeah.
Aye, but it's how the interpretation of the auditor as to how he has.
In most cases, and certainly my case, it'll all be done on the day with the Excel spreadsheet in front of you. So the person from the church will see what's been typed in.
Fine, that's what we were asking for.
I think, George, I think Robert has given a better response to this than I did. Are you happier with what Robert said? Because I'm in agreement with what Robert said.
I've maybe misinterpreted.
Yeah.
Stand back from it.
George, I'm quite relaxed about this. Your line of questioning is entirely appropriate. I think Robert's given a better response to it than I have. I agree with what Robert said, and I think it's it feels a bit more satisfactory maybe from your perspective, if that's fair enough.
Thank you.
Ian, can I ask a question?
Yes.
It's Philip McCulloch from St Maccas Run, Furley Bridge, Weir. I'm also an auditor. One of the questions that we've been thinking about is we've been considering the physical, content of the building, and I was wondering, have we looked at the grading of the building? Is it a historic building, grade A or grade B or whatever, and I'm sure that would sort of relate to whether the building is viable or otherwise.
Yeah, I think, Philip, I think, and this is where my detail on this is letting me down, I think that is part of the form. Douglas,
it's there.
Yeah.
Douglas Thompson here. General trustees already have listings of historic buildings A, B, and C. So I'm sure that will also be taken into account anyway.
I think Philip, it's in the form, but I would want to go away and check that.
Okay, having just received the forms, then my apologies for asking the question.
No, it's fine. Questions are fine. I could be wrong on that because I've been looking at listed buildings in a different context, so it might have slipped in my head from the wrong place.
Ian.
Ian. Oh, sorry, on you go.
So, Ian, Mark McCaskill from Kilbarchan Parish. I'd like to actually ask a specific question rather than the more esoteric ones that congregations might be interested in. My specific question is to do with the type of certificates that the auditors will be wanting to see on the day. And one of the ones that's talked about here is the electrical installation condition report. Now, my understanding of that was that previously that was something for landlords of tenanted houses to provide. I take it that the manse, for example, is being classed as a tenanted property and therefore should have that sort of report.
My understanding, Malcolm, was that the church needed it, as a church building needs it as well.
Yes, it's in the property register as a requirement.
Absolutely.
Right, that's fine, Douglas. Thanks for that, because the query I had was, is this manse only ? The other question is to do with fire alarm test certificates. What we're talking about here, I take it, is the likes of having a smoke bomb test.
Yeah, that's probably the way they check it. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, my understanding of that is you'd have to get a company like Chubb, say for instance, to do the proper test on the fire alarm.
Yeah.
The detection system.
Yeah, we have a company, Malcolm. I mean, I could find their name out, and it used to be called West Coast Fire, but we've shifted it to some outfit near Stirling that come in and do our fire alarm testing every 3 months or something like that.
Yeah, that's fine. And
I'm not even entirely precisely sure what they do, but we just get them in to do it.
So, can I ask a question about manses? Because my reading of what I've seen was that manses were not included in this.
They might be a future date, but they're not part of this exercise.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Ian, I had a question on the auditing process. Auditors are all trained the same, the same training, etc. But any two auditors may have different opinions when you're doing something interpretive. Is there a review process when all the results are collated to see whether or not there's consistency among the audits?
Well, we'll certainly have a look at that. I was kind of reflecting on that as well. I don't want to go, but it's there's a weather eye cast over this, to almost say that will be cast over this, going, does this make sense? And so we are doing our absolute level best to ensure consistency. I take your point. I think we've done everything we can do in terms of the training and stuff, but it's not, if there's some just anomaly in this process, the outcomes are fed back to the congregation. It can be detected, then it can be revisited. There may be anomalous results in it, and they will be relooked at and with an understanding of why it's happened. It's not just a case of we write some stuff in a form, we don't show it to the churches, we shove it off to Edinburgh to get a computer program, and then you've got a percentage score that's locked in stone. We're going to be running some sort of quality control process over this.
Good, thank you.
Okay, I had promised that we'd do this in an hour. We're at an hour and 5 minutes. Is there any last burning questions?
Yes, Peter Swanky from Hamilton,
Hi, Peter.
Just a one question. Will the auditor be from a different presbytery from the church?
No, not a different presbytery, but from a different local mission group.
Okay.
So they have, in a sense, they are not coming, to be absolutely kind of clear cut on this. We talked about this in the property committee, and we decided to reduce travelling, that folk from the north of the river would audit north of the river, and folk south of the river would audit south of the river. Otherwise, we're driving to all the Airts multiple times. However, no one from one area, local mission group, is ever auditing in there. So that means there is, there's no sense that there could be any, if you like, competition, right? I'm not even suggesting anyone would do that, but that possibility has been removed. The auditors are not coming from a different presbytery, though. They're coming from our presbytery.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, one more question, if there is one, and then we'll close off. There will be a recording of this made available.
Can I just say one thing? Ultimately, each church is in competition with its neighbouring churches. And even if they were all in physically poor condition, presumably they wouldn't all be closed because we have to serve the congregations. So there must be some way of looking at us in another light that sort of balances up the physical
yes, this
pluses
is
and minuses.
I agree with that, Sue. This is going to be this is why consistency within a local mission group is absolutely imperative to the integrity of what we're doing. Effectively, the buildings that are going to be compared to each other are going to be ones, in general, are going to be ones that are the most important comparisons are with the neighbouring buildings. And you are right. This contains a competitive element that is it's just the way we do it, isn't it? But it's the way the process forced itself on us. So therefore, you cannot if there's a bunch of local low scores in a local mission group, absolutely, there's a relative part of the it's the relative scores that then become important.
Thank you.
Sorry, Ian, Billy Ferguson, West Kirkland-on-Bath. A very quick question. I'm the property convener at West Kirk.
Yeah.
How long is this process going to take in reaching a final decision? Because the longer it drags on, with the presbytery, churches across the presbytery are going to be spending money on buildings which don't have a future. That doesn't help anyone. Money's a scarce resource, I'm sure, for most of us. So what's the time scale in terms of saying, right, here are the churches we're keeping and here are the churches which are going to be disposed of?
I don't. It's slightly above my pay grade to answer that, but I'm going to try anyway. We are right now. We're in a wee bit of a no man's land. We're before AMBA. I think we will know the broad picture by sometime, I'm going to say mid-April. Right, we're saying completely at the end of March. There's a bit of process. We'll know a broad picture. I sincerely hope that we're not facing a bunch of appeals or actually folk are going, no, that was okay. If it ends up in contention, then we're in either it's been badly implemented by the property committee, i.e. me, or else we're in a right big hole if we end up full of contention. I hope we're all able to turn around in April and go, we might have spotted a few gremlins on the way. It's inevitable. This is a huge exercise, but I hope we're actually thinking that felt reasonably fair. That will then produce an AMBA landscape across the presbytery. There will be some things, I think, that are clear and emerging. We can probably sense what they are already, and AMBA will certainly help clarify some of the decisions that are made. We are in a tight time frame in terms of presbytery mission planning, because the General Assembly has said you need a presbytery mission plan by the end of 2022, otherwise vacant churches can't call ministers. So there is we've had a fire lit under us, quite rightly, because some churches have been vacant for a long time. So this is going to happen, I think, has to happen in many ways quickly. And in the same time, the other thing is, how on earth do you make these huge decisions? I think there will be some easy decisions, and I think there will be some that are very, very balanced and nuanced and less clear from it, such as life. So I think maybe the easy decisions get made sooner, Billy, and the balanced ones, good grief, we need the wisdom of Solomon to deal with it. But AMBA will. So, for example, I mean, a sharper answer to that is there is an issue with it's in the Presbytery papers. There's a significant issue with the roof of a church north of the river, and it's a bit like James, I think, from Greenock, talking about, you know, this audit catches them at a bad time, and that church needs to spend a large sum of money. The situation with it is, and I'm not advocating, this is not a Presbytery decision, the situation is, if that roof is not repaired this summer, that building will suffer enormous. I mean, it cannot sustain itself over another winter. And you're in this terrible dilemma of spending a large sum of money on a building that has, it's not that, I'm not going to say it has an uncertain future, but there's few buildings that we go, that's an absolute definite keeper. So we're right in that no man's land at the moment. Yep. And it'll lead to, it leads to messy conversations. Don't know if that was is that a fair enough answer?
Yes. For me, the sooner the better, because otherwise we're going to use a lot of reserves spending money on buildings and that don't have a future.
That
doesn't make sense.
Part of the drive in this is to stop that hemorrhaging of it. Part of the drive, and I should have introduced them. Our Presbytery Buildings Officer, Jamie McNamara, is on this call. You might find him down the screen somewhere. So part of the reasoning for a Presbytery Building Officer is actually just to get better value in procurement. I mean, genius, who'd have thought it, that having a construction professional arguing your point on your side would actually produce better procurement? I mean, who'd have guessed it? It's great. It's really good. That's a really good step forward, and we need to stop hemorrhaging money on too many buildings, because you're right, Billy. We're being weighed down by it. It's a tricky balancing act that we are all called to face. Just as a straw poll, I'm only looking at one screen. We're gonna call it over at this point. What is the feeling about this? Has tonight clarified anything? Thumbs up, thumbs down? Yeah, I'm just wondering, did it work as a piece of communication? How are you feeling about AMBA? Middle, yeah.
Let's try it.
Yeah, I'm seeing a few thumbs down. I'm seeing some thumbs. I'm only on one screen, but yeah. Hopefully, well, we are where we are, as they say. I read a book about Scottish granny sayings at Christmas. It was just one of these wee things, and it was a much better version of "We are where we are." It was "A neep's a neep," which I really liked. So on that note, let's finish this call. Let's pray together and then say good night. Loving God, this is difficult, and we realise what we face, and we realise that pain lies round the corner, and yet we must do it as well. Lord, help this process for the queries, the questions, and we pray as well that it would appear in the end, when it's done, to have been done well and done fairly. Bless the auditors. Thank you for their commitment. Let them go forward, and we pray that the conversations they have with congregational reps would be fruitful, pleasant, and warm. Lord, bless us on this journey and grant us your wisdom. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Good night.
Good night, folks.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.